Good morning, distinguished colleagues. Having confirmed the quorum, I am pleased to declare open this regular meeting of the Permanent Council. Before proceeding, allow me to thank all delegates for their participation in yesterday's informal meeting, which was convened to exchange views on the draft order of business for today's meeting. Following that consultation, in accordance with Article 43 of the Rules of Procedure, the draft order of business contained in document CP/OD-2601/26 is now formally submitted for the consideration of the Permanent Council. Chair recognizes the delegation of Brazil.
Chair, I ask if I could to take the floor at this time to ask that item 4 of the draft order of business be subject to a vote, as its inclusion at this time in the council agenda is legally questionable and politically harmful. After a clear effort to interfere in the autonomy and independence of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, on seeking to call into question a selection process already underway, indeed, at a moment when the list of finalists has already been published, and considering that the criteria are the same as 20 years ago and are well known to everyone. Trying to change the rules of the game once the game is already underway is not just contrary to the rule of law and juridical security, it constitutes undue interference in the work of an independent body for the protection and promotion of human rights, and we think it's not tolerable to establish a dangerous precedent that tends to undermine the foundations of the Inter-American human rights system. We have no problem engaging in a dialogue on the other aspects of the activities of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, so long as it's a timely moment, without any competition underway, and in the context of regional, frank, and transparent dialogue that the Commission promotes on every 6 months with regional groups and individual delegations. That is why we ask, Mr. Chairman, that inclusion of item 4 on today's order of business be put to a vote. Thank you.
Delegation of Chile, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chairman. As far as I understand, and we had a meeting yesterday specifically on this topic with other countries, other delegations, it is actually a request for information. I don't see any problem asking and explaining. Let us also recall something. The OAS often changes over time in terms of individuals and delegations, and it's good to have this type of information that is not any sort of meddling or any sort of attempt to change the rules of the game. We simply would like to know why or how the different processes unfold and are conducted. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Chile. Considering the request by the delegation of Brazil, the Permanent Council will now proceed to a vote to determine whether it approves the draft order of business for today's meeting. In accordance with Article Delegation of Brazil.
Ponto de ordem, senhor.
A point of order, Chair, since you already announced the beginning of the vote, we cannot speak substantively on the issue, but my request was to put item 4 to a vote, the inclusion of item 4, not the order of business in its totality. I am simply asking for a vote on whether or not item 4 should continue to be included in the order of business. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Brazil. So we will make the appropriate corrections. So we'll proceed with a vote to determine the inclusion of item 4 on the order of business. In accordance with Article 58B of the Rules of Procedure, the vote shall be conducted through the electronic voting system available in this room. The Chair would also like to recall that pursuant to Article 57 and 60 of the Rules of Procedure, decisions of the Permanent Council are adopted by the absolute majority of its members, equivalent to 18 votes, and that no representative may interrupt the voting process except to raise a point of order strictly related to the manner in which the vote is being conducted. We will take a brief recess for a couple of minutes to allow the Secretariat to upload the voting question into the electronic system. The question will appear on your screen for the vote and would be for the inclusion of item 4 in the order of business. Once the system is activated, delegations should cast the votes by sending one of the 3 available options: yes, no, or abstention.
La pregunta.
Delegation of Paraguay, what point of order you'd like to raise?
Sí, gracias.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a question. What type of majority would be needed on a vote such as this? Could you clarify that, please? Thank you.
As I said previously, it's the equivalent of 18 votes. Okay, the voting system is now active, and the question will be for the inclusion of item 4 on the order of business. I will now allow a few minutes for delegations to cast their votes. take it that we have all voted. With a vote of 15 in favor, 6 against, 10 abstentions, and 2 absentees, the item will have to be removed, withdrawn from the agenda. Okay, approved. That's it. Esteemed colleagues, having adopted the order of business, allow me to take this opportunity on behalf of the Permanent Council to extend our warmest congratulations to President Abelardo de la Espriella on his assumption of office as President of the Republic of Colombia on August 7th. We convey our best wishes to President de la Espriella for every success in the discharge of his responsibility and for the continued well-being, prosperity, and progress of the Colombian people. Allow me also, on behalf of the Permanent Council, to extend our warmest congratulations to the delegations of Uruguay, as well as to the government and people of Uruguay, on the occasion of the upcoming celebration of the National Day on August 25th. On behalf of the Permanent Council, I extend our best wishes to the people of Uruguay for peace, prosperity, and continued progress as they celebrate this important national occasion. Esteemed colleagues, before proceeding, I would like to consult the Permanent Council on whether it agrees on an exceptional basis to waive the time limit established in Article 4.6 of the Rules of Procedure at the request of the delegation of the United States to allow the representative of the United States up to 10 minutes for their interventions under Item 2 of the order of business. If there is no paragraph, you have the floor.
Presidente, no, la verdad.
Chair, you actually had not given me the floor when I'd asked for it prior to the approval of the order of business and the removal of item 4. I just wanted to indicate, but well, now it was approved. I accept that, no problem, but you hadn't given me the floor. So I had just wanted to say that the question was not well formulated, because the question should have been, do we remove this point, rather do we approve this point, because the item was already on the order of business. I just wanted to state that for the record, but unfortunately you had not given me the floor before it was approved. Thank you.
Your point is noted, delegation of paragraph, except that the question was can be posed in any of the two orders, and the delegation posed it in that manner, and the voting process is self-conducted. And apologies for not. I hope for not acknowledging your request for the floor, and we can proceed noting your concern. So there being no objections for the extension of time for the delegation of the United States, it is so agreed. As the next item on the order of business, and in accordance with the request submitted by the delegation of the United States, and pursuant to Article 77 of the Rules of Procedure, We'll proceed with the consideration of the draft resolution entitled Convocation of a Meeting of Consultation of Ministers of Foreign Affairs to consider the situation in Nicaragua. The draft resolution has been presented by the delegation of Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Bolivia, Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Jamaica, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Trinidad and Tobago, and the United States, with the co-sponsorship of the delegations of Canada, Chile, Colombia, Guatemala, Honduras, St. Kitts and Nevis, contained in document CP/Doc 6242/26, revised version of the Corridendum 1 in English. For this purpose, I am pleased to offer the floor to the delegation of the United States to present the draft resolution. Ambassador Cusack, welcome back to the OAS Permanent Council. You have the floor for up to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and distinguished representatives. The questions before us today is straightforward. Will this organization use a mechanism expressly provided by its charter to allow our foreign ministers to meet and consider the situation in Nicaragua, an urgent problem of common interest to our region? The United States thanks the many delegations that engaged seriously with us since August 5th. I want to particularly recognize the openness and pragmatism of our valued Caribbean colleagues. Several came to us with specific concerns. They proposed constructive ways forward. Together, we found common ground. I also want to recognize those who have joined as co-sponsors of this resolution. I want to thank Secretary General Ramdin for his clear-eyed assessment and purposeful attention. As the Secretary General told this Council August 5, quote, "The erosion of democracy in one country of the Americas is never solely a domestic matter, and that the circumstances in Nicaragua call for collective action." The Trump administration also appreciates the engagement of Nicaraguans in exile. They tirelessly urge our hemisphere's continued engagement. This group of co-sponsors negotiated considerably and in good faith. They have made consensus possible so this body can take meaningful action. The resolution before us now does exactly two things. First, pursuant to Articles 61, 62, and 63 of the OAS Charter, it convenes a meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs. It does so on an urgent basis and as soon as practicable. The meeting of consultation is to consider the situation in Nicaragua and appropriate actions consistent with the OAS Charter, the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and international law. Second, the resolution asks the chair of this council, with the support of the General Secretariat, to prepare the agenda and regulations for that meeting. That is all that the resolution does. With this resolution, we ask the council simply to allow the foreign ministers to meet, consider the situation, and decide next steps among themselves. To colleagues who emphasize the importance of dialogue and multilateralism, this resolution is a call to do exactly that. It proposes the highest level diplomatic consultation available to this organization. To those who urge collective multilateral action, we agree. That is exactly why we're here today. We, the member states of the OAS, have a duty to address issues of common interest to the American states. We should not sit by idly issuing intermittent condemnations. The Charter gives us the mechanism we propose today. We should use it. Repeated condemnation without meaningful institutional action teaches Murillo and Ortega that they can simply wait us out. The Secretary General has spoken of moving this organization from admiring problem towards action and compliance. This resolution is a clear opportunity to do exactly that. The United States urges adoption of this resolution by consensus. Let us show Murillo and Ortega that they can no longer simply wait us out. Let us show we are a council of resolve and action. The co-sponsors have compromised considerably and in good faith to make that possible. But consensus is valuable because it enables collective action against the dictators holding Nicaragua hostage. It cannot become another word for indefinite delay. Adoption of this resolution will not by itself resolve the tragedy in Nicaragua. However, adoption will demonstrate the commitments contained in our charter are more than words on paper. Representative democracy is an indispensable condition for the stability, peace, and development of the region. We must not allow its dismantling to go without action. The Murillo Ortega dictatorship has deprived millions of Nicaraguans of any meaningful voice in their own country. The Nicaraguans do not ask this council to choose Nicaragua's future for them. That is their right, not ours. But it is our responsibility to uphold their right so Nicaraguans can one day choose that future themselves. 2 weeks ago, I said that the actions we take, or fail to take, will matter. I told this group how history judged our lack of inaction previously. Thousands more lives were lost in Nicaragua then. Which delegations will make the choice to end that history of inaction today? Convene the ministers, let them deliberate, and let them do their job. The United States urges the adoption today of Revision 1. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, delegations.
Thank you. Thank you, delegation of the United States. At this point, I would like to ask the Permanent Council if it is in a position to approve the draft resolution under consideration at this time. Delegation of Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, my delegation would like to underscore the serious nature of the democratic situation in Nicaragua. It's important to respond in a consistent way and in a careful and balanced manner. We express our concern with the ongoing erosion of democratic principles in Nicaragua, especially the weakening of fundamental institutions and opportunities for political and civic participation. We also reiterate that it is important to support fundamental freedoms that promote democratic harmony and full participation of all sectors of Nicaraguan society. We need to look at the opportunities that we have before us. We don't feel that this is the appropriate time to convene a meeting of ministers. It goes against best diplomatic practice and the spirit of cooperation in multilateral organizations. It does not contribute to a sustainable solution. We risk precipitating a negotiation, and this may not lead us to the desired outcome. Brazil supports a constructive approach, one based on dialogue, which we saw with the joint recent events in Nicaragua, which was circulated by the General Secretariat. We instead support creating a group of regional specialists, as was suggested by Secretary General Ramdin. We don't feel it's constructive to circulate a new text without first having further consultations. We've looked at a variety of texts, but many of these did not take into account our recommendations or suggestions. And we would propose that this draft declaration be put to a vote. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, delegation of Brazil. Just give us a few minutes to get the correct question. The question is simple. Does the Permanent Council approve the draft resolution in question? Paraguay, you have the floor.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. We'd like to know if it's possible to receive the question before the vote so that we have a little more time to look at it, because so much depends on how the question is worded. Could you give us a bit more time and tell us the question first, and then give us a bit more time before we actually start the vote? Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Paraguay. Delegation of Peru, you have the floor.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say something similar. We saw what happened with the first vote. It is useful to have time to look at the question and discuss it before we actually proceed with the vote and see it in the electronic voting system. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Peru. Delegation of Brazil, you have the floor.
Chair, my delegation asked for this proposal to be considered in a vote. We are all aware of what the proposal is. I'm not really sure what the doubt is here. There is a question that has been worded, and we are asking that this be put to a vote. There's no real reason to delay the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Brazil. Delegation of Argentina, you have the floor.
Presidente, yo quería...
Chair, I would like to echo the words of Paraguay and Peru and what they've asked, because the issue that is at stake here is far too delicate for us to not have clarity as to the question being put to a vote. Let's be clear. This is an emergency. It is urgent. There's a situation in a country that has decided to do away with elections and democracy. None of our countries which have signed the charter and are part of this inter-American system can do nothing faced with this situation. So it's extremely important to understand what the question is, because each and every one of our colleagues needs to understand what is at stake when they vote on this question. It's a very delicate issue, and all the people from Nicaragua who are in exile, who have lost their nationality and citizenship because of the decisions of this government, all of the people who are affected by this situation are looking to see what the OAS is doing and what other countries will do in terms of demonstrating their solidarity with the Nicaraguan people who are suffering from this repression and who fear they may never have a democracy again. This is an extremely delicate issue, Chair. And therefore, perhaps we need to have a recess or some additional time so that everyone understands what the question is. So please, Chair, to honor this question, can we please consider having extra time or even a recess to consider this question? Because again, this issue is extremely urgent. A decision needs to be taken today, not tomorrow. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Argentina. Delegation of Paraguay, you have the floor.
Sí, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, I think that my request is legitimate. In previous sessions and even in the preparatory committee, several delegations, including those who are proposing the vote, raised questions and had many questions about how these questions were being phrased before being put to a vote. So I think my request is legitimate and it's valid to ask for the extra time. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Paraguay. Delegation of Brazil, you have the floor.
Senhor Presidente,
Chair, firstly, I wanted to raise a point of order. We are looking at a draft resolution, and is the council ready to approve this draft? That was the question that was raised. My delegation is exercising its rights as a member state and took the floor to ask if this could be put to a vote. We're not asking a question. There's a proposal that was presented, there was a draft resolution, and there's not consensus on that draft resolution. So my delegation asked for the floor to put this to a vote, Chair. And therefore, once the process is underway, once the voting process is underway, there is not time to discuss the substance of this proposal. It is up to countries to vote, because indeed we are facing a serious issue regarding democracy in Nicaragua. So as a point of order, Chair, and in accordance with the rules of procedure of the Permanent Council, we ask that this be put to a vote. Put the draft resolution to a vote. Perhaps our legal advisor could clarify this further for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Brazil. Delegation of Argentina, you have the floor.
Gracias, presidente. Repito.
Thank you, Chair. I repeat, in order to have clarity on our positions, I would request a 10-minute recess before we proceed with the voting process. I am not going against any country's request. I believe that you have the power, Chair, if I'm not mistaken, to grant us that 10-minute recess so that we can discuss and be more clear as to what we're voting on. Again, there's no room to be in the middle here. You're either in favor of defending democratic principles in this emergency situation and involving our government so that they can discuss how this situation could be resolved. The only other alternative is to be responsible for what's going on in Nicaragua. That is why I'm asking for a recess, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Argentina. Floor recognizes the Delegation of Peru.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo the words of the delegations of Paraguay and Argentina. The more clarity we have, the better, especially for such a sensitive issue. Perhaps the legal secretary can help us out here, but in any event, I just wanted to share something that I've shared previously. This is a very sensitive and important time. We have been hearing people say, what is the OAS good for? And it's good for situations like this when we need to address serious problems affecting a democracy in another country. We've heard various positions, and for Peru, this is an opportunity for our highest level authorities to come together to address this extremely serious situation. That's why it is important to escalate this to a higher level of authority and convene a meeting of ministers so that we can move forward. Thank you, Chair.
Delegation of Brazil.
Senhor presidente, ponto de ordem.
Point of order. The rules of procedure state that once the voting process is underway, it has to be carried out. There is no opportunity for debate. Secondly, Chair, we all have the opportunity to express our country's position on this issue. Now, we're not talking about our positions right now. What I'm requesting is for us to apply and implement the rules of procedure. And if there's an issue with that, we can ask the legal secretary. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Brazil. Delegation of Argentina, you have the floor again.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. I repeat what I stated earlier, to honor this issue and to address this emergency situation. There are so many people who depend on what we decide today. Again, I ask for a 10-minute recess so that we can continue the process that the delegation of Brazil proposed. That is all. I don't think that this goes against the objectives of our colleague. This would just be beneficial for all of us so that we are clear about what is at stake when we vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador. Delegation of Mexico, you have the
Muchas gracias,
floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is part of the process. What we do need to implement the rules of procedure. We need to proceed to a vote because that is what the rules of procedure say. It's very easy to clarify what the question is with respect to the draft resolution presented by the delegation of the United States. That's the only thing that needs to be resolved. Thank you.
Okay, having heard the contributions of a number of delegations, I just need to remind you that the document before us is document CP/doc 6242/26, revision 1. And that particular document and subject matter was presented by the delegation of the United States, and Brazil raised the question, and the question, I would repeat, is does the Permanent Council adopt draft resolution CP/doc/26 Rev 1? This is the question before us. I hope that provides the clarity required for the question. Delegation of Argentina.
Si no entendí mal,
If I understood correctly, Chair, this means that what we vote on is the proposal presented by the United States and co-sponsored by other member states. It does not predetermine what the outcome of the meeting of foreign ministers will be. It means holding such a meeting. That's what I wanted to be clear about. In this draft, we don't know anything about the outcome of that meeting. The draft simply says that a meeting of ministers will be held. I say that so that everything is clear, because nothing is predetermined. I want that to be very clear. This is an opportunity for foreign ministers to sit around the same table and decide what action to take about Nicaragua. We're not talking about predetermining any outcome or solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, delegation of Argentina. Delegation of Brazil, you have the floor.
Obrigado, senhor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to note that in the introduction of this draft resolution and the presentation of this document, we heard from the United States, and we all know what the contents of this document is. It's been published, and I am just proposing that we vote on that draft resolution. We can be for, against, we can abstain. It's very simple. We're just considering a proposal, a proposed text. My delegation is asking for a vote to be held. Article 60 of the rules of procedure of the Permanent Council state that once the vote has begun, no one can interrupt that process unless they wish to raise a point of order about how the technical process of the vote is taking place. So the floor was requested to, if the floor is request to discuss the content of the resolution, that we cannot do. So, Chair, what I'm asking is that we address this because some delegations are not following what the rules of procedure state. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Brazil. Delegation of Argentina, you have the floor.
Por último, presidente.
Chair, I cannot allow anyone to say that anyone here is violating the rules. The rules are very clear, and what we're asking for is for all countries to understand what's at stake with this resolution and the risk that we run if the OAS is not addressing a situation like this. I don't think anyone is violating the rules here. And ultimately, we need to ask our people what they think, but now is not the time for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Argentina. Brazil.
Uma questão de ordem de novo, senhor presidente.
Point of order once again. Every delegation has the right to have any interpretation they wish regarding the rules, but what is written down is written down. We're not changing anything. Also, my delegation is fully within its right to say or to opine when it believes that there is a violation of the rules. This is our right. We have the right, our delegation does, to say that these rules are not being respected by another delegation, and we are simply call attention to the need to abide by the rules. It's very simple. We've already gone through votes such as this many times. There's no extraordinary question being put. We had the presentation of the contents of the order of business, and my delegation simply asked that that order of business be put to a vote. Any consideration regarding its contents, we can discuss after the vote, no problem. I already explained why it is that my delegation asked for the vote. I hope that there's respect for our positions as well. It's not a question of being in favor or against human rights or democracy. We are in favor of human rights and democracy, but we don't want any remedy to kill the patient. We need to act in keeping with the tradition, and that is what I said earlier. So let us please vote Article 60. Chair, you, Chair, are entrusted with carrying out the rules. So I would like it if my request for the application of Article 60 could be taken into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Brazil. Uruguay, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Respectfully, kindly, I ask that we bring this dialogue to a close. We are all member states here with professional teams, and we have studied all of the alternatives. We've participated in previous discussions on this proposal from the United States. Therefore, I think that we are turning in circles here around a procedural issue when, in reality, the proposal is clear and the process is clear. Delegations have had time to review what the alternatives are. So, very kindly, with your team and legal advisor, I would ask that we put the question on the table and then proceed with the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Uruguay. Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to clarify the question that is being asked so that do we agree with the proposal? If we agree, it's a yes. If we don't agree, it's a no. Am I correct in my understanding? Thank you.
Yes, you are. Thank you, Delegation of Colombia. Delegation of Argentina, you have the floor again.
Prometo mi última intervención.
I promise this is the last time I'm taking the floor, Chair. Here it was said that the draft resolution could kill the patient. And I don't think our foreign ministers want to kill any patient. What they want to do is find solutions. That is what was said. That is what was said, that we don't want to kill the patient. And I don't want it to be interpreted as if we vote yes on this resolution, we're killing a patient. It's quite the opposite. I just bring this up because that is what was said. Thank you, Chair, and I will not take the floor again on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Delegation of Argentina, and delegates who have made the contributions. Again, for clarity, the matter before the Council is the resolution contained in document CP/6242/26, revision 1. The Permanent Council was asked if it is in a position to approve the draft resolution under consideration, and we had a request, a contribution from Brazil, requesting a vote. The vote, therefore, is on the question: does the Permanent Council adopt resolution CP/6242/26, revised version? Considering Delegation of Ecuador, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. I congratulate your conduct of this meeting at difficult moments. In effect, all of us states are sovereign, and all of the states know perfectly well when to defend a procedure. An effort is being made to teach us lessons when the only thing that has been proposed by the delegation of the United States is very clear. Let us bring the foreign ministers here to discuss a substantive point or a substantive matter. That's what it is. And we cannot allow that under the pretext of calling us to order in a procedure that that there be tacit insinuations as if we were using medicine to kill someone. Watch out. We cannot allow that. And in the name of the Republic of Ecuador, I expressly reject conduct such as that. I'm sorry, but it's totally unacceptable.
Presidente, de novo, num ponto.
Once again, a point of order. The vote process has begun, and the delegations keep insisting on taking the floor. Now, if there's any rejection with respect to anything my delegation says, it's the right of any delegation to reject it, just as my delegation has the right to reject the rejection. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Brazil. Considering the request submitted by the Delegation of Brazil, the Permanent Council will proceed to a vote to determine whether the Permanent Council adopts draft resolution CP/6242/26, revision 1. In accordance with Article 5(8)(b) of the Rules of Procedure, the vote shall be conducted through electronic voting system in this room. The Chair would also like to recall that pursuant to Article 5(7) and 6(0) of the Rules of Procedure, decisions of the Permanent Council are adopted by the absolute majority of its members, equivalent to 18 votes. I repeat, equivalent to 18 votes, and that no representative may interrupt the voting process except to raise a point of order strictly related to the matter in which the vote is being conducted. We will take a brief recess, as we did before, a couple of minutes to allow for the Secretariat to upload the voting question into the electronic system. The question will appear on your screens for the vote, and the question is the following. Does the Permanent Council adopt draft resolution CP/Doc 6242/26, revision 1? Once the system is activated, delegations should cast their votes by selecting one of the three available options: yes, no, or abstention. The electronic voting system is now active. I will allow a few minutes for delegations to cast their votes. With a vote of 29 in favor, 1 against, 1 abstention, and 2 absent, Permanent Council hereby adopts resolution CP. There being no further observations, the draft resolution is hereby approved. I now offer the floor.
President,
Sí,
Pedí la palabra.
I've asked for the floor.
it's not short. Delegation of Mexico, you have the floor.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, Mexico has followed the evolution of the political and human rights situation in Nicaragua and has clearly expressed its position in this regard, reiterating its permanent commitment to promote, protect, and respect human rights and fundamental freedoms. These are essential values that govern democratic coexistence in our region. Our charter establishes clearly the policies that, or our constitution rather, establishes the principles that guide our foreign policy: self-determination of peoples, non-intervention, peaceful settlement of disputes, and unlimited respect for human rights. Now, strictly adhering to our constitutional framework and the foundational documents of the OAS, Mexico has abstained, for it is of the view that the internal situation of Nicaragua does not constitute a threat to hemispheric peace or security. A characterization along those lines could open the way to propose actions that go beyond the authority of this organization on addressing internal matters of a state that is no longer a party to the OAS and which could be incompatible with the principles of respect for sovereignty, self-determination, non-intervention, and peaceful settlement of disputes enshrined in the OAS Charter, in the UN Charter, and in the American Convention on Human Rights. The experience of our region shows that demarcating or describing an internal political crisis as a threat to security does not necessarily contribute to resolving it. To the contrary, it could give rise to dynamics of confrontation, deepen isolation, and open the door to measures which, far from favoring a peaceful solution, end up producing greater destabilization. For this reason, we do not agree with calling a meeting of a consultation of ministers of foreign affairs regarding the situation in Nicaragua without understanding clearly just what the appropriate actions referred to might be, and without having carried out a prior process of consultation and analysis regarding said actions. That could take this process beyond the search for peaceful and diplomatic solutions, gearing it to a approach that accords priority to security issues over what is essentially a political and human rights situation. Mexico considers that space exists to continue addressing this topic, to promote respect for human rights, favor dialogue, and explore diplomatic means that can contribute to a peaceful solution in Nicaragua. Mexico is ready and willing to participate constructively in such efforts, but we cannot go along with the calling of a meeting that could contribute to transforming a political and human rights situation into a regional security issue and opening up a process, the scope of which and the possible consequences of which are not sufficiently delimited. Let us recall the international instruments that are in force to which Nicaragua is a party, particularly the American Convention on Human Rights, which enshrines the right of every person to participate in authentic periodic elections through universal, free, and secret ballot. President Claudia Sheinbaum was clear on indicating that we always agree with democracy, and with respect to the situation, she stated, democracy, democracy, democracy. Power of the people, government of the people. Faithful to its diplomatic tradition, Mexico is of the view that any effort undertaken by this organization should be focused on extending bridges, according priority to peaceful solutions, and strengthening channels of dialogue and engagement with the inter-American human rights system, always in the context of mutual respect for sovereignty as among states, and always understanding clearly that the Americas is of its peoples in full exercise of their sovereignty. We reiterate our full willingness to work constructively in any process that may facilitate an inclusive dialogue, promote international cooperation for development, and strengthen comprehensive protection for human rights in Nicaragua under the premise that peace and democracy can be consolidated by respecting the popular will, sovereignty, and understanding among nations. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Mexico. Delegation of United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to thank all the other delegations who worked so closely with us and with the other co-sponsors of the resolution to get it done. We look forward to continuing that process and that collaboration to try to bring the ministers together and come up with a good solution on that. I also wanted to just mention we had the item on the Human Rights Commission that went off the agenda. We would look forward to being able to discuss that. Our concern there is not over an outcome of the Human Rights Commission, but over a process in which there were 145 applicants for a position, and the commissioners only saw 16 of them. 90-some% were knocked out by the staff before the commissioners ever saw that, and we think that's a matter that is rightly of concern to the member states. So I wanted to get that on the record too, Mr. Chair. But again, thank all of the delegations who worked so collaboratively on the Nicaragua item, and we will work on that in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of the United States. Delegation of Uruguay, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Uruguay has voted for the draft resolution, bearing in mind in particular our concern over the growing deterioration of the human rights situation, the shutdown of civic space, and the progressive erosion of the institution's democratic guarantees in Nicaragua. We understand that recent events there deepen a situation that has a very negative impact on the democratic order and full enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms of the Nicaraguan people. And they are incompatible with the democratic principles and values enshrined in the OAS Charter and in the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We consider that reducing pluralism by any type of prohibition on parties or leaders alleging that they committed supposed crimes against national security seeks to consolidate the persecution underway and stands in the way of building trust and moving towards effective guarantees for the full respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms of the Nicaraguan people. In the face of this situation, our government considers it important that the member states, so that we be able to analyze and hammer out a collective response in the context of multilateral mechanisms in force and with full respect for the principles of international law, including the principle of non-intervention in internal affairs, and thus help contribute to a path that would allow the restoration of democratic governance in that country. For Uruguay, the search for solutions should accord priority to bringing about the conditions necessary for a genuine, inclusive dialogue geared to producing specific results. We reiterate emphatically our appeal to the Nicaraguan authorities to fully carry out its international human rights obligations and, in particular, to guarantee the political rights recognized in Article 23 of the American Convention on Human Rights and the Inter-American Democratic Charter, including the right of all citizens to participate in the conduct of public affairs and to vote and be elected in periodic, genuine elections held through universal suffrage, and also ensuring the conditions necessary for political pluralism. Accordingly, we join the efforts of the international community to bring about conditions that make it possible for Nicaraguans themselves to move towards a peaceful, democratic, and inclusive solution based on respect of the rule of law and political pluralism, fundamental freedoms, and the effective participation of all sectors of society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Uruguay. Costa Rica, the floor is yours.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. Costa Rica speaks as a co-sponsor of this draft resolution that we've just approved. to hold an urgent meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs and to monitor the situation in Nicaragua. During the special session that we held last August 5th, our delegation expressed its profound concern over the progressive dismantling of democratic institutions, the shutdown of civic space, restrictions on fundamental freedoms, and the persecution of critical voices in Nicaragua. And since then, the need for a responsible and timely collective response has not diminished. The declarations by the highest level Nicaraguan authorities and the reforms undertaken have limited political pluralism and saying that ending elections as a legitimate way of accessing power confirms the seriousness of the situation. These events cannot be considered as solely an internal matter, for their political, humanitarian, immigration, and security consequences transcend national borders, having a direct impact on our region. As a neighbor and a country that has hosted thousands and thousands of Nicaraguans who sought protection in our territory, Costa Rica is directly familiar with the humanitarian consequences of this crisis. The convening that we have considered today is fully supported by Articles 61, 62, and 63 of the Charter of the Organization of American States, which authorizes the member states to meet and consider problems that are urgent in nature and of common interest. The meeting of consultation, therefore, is a legitimate mechanism provided for in our charter, and its convening makes it possible to have political consideration of this situation, promote a dialogue among the member states, and determine the actions to be taken in keeping with the OAS Charter, the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and international law. This resolution that we've approved reflects an effort of dialogue and consensus building. The text has incorporated comments and contributions formulated by the different delegations, including what was stated during the special session held last August 5th. We're grateful for the willingness of those states who have constructively contributed to this resolution. We consider that the seriousness of the situation requires that we keep the hemisphere's political attention focused and that we make responsible use of those mechanisms that our inter-American instruments make available to the states. Convening a meeting of consultation doesn't mean shutting the doors to dialogue. To the contrary, it represents a collective decision to not remain indifferent and to seek, through multilateralism and diplomacy, a response in keeping with the urgency and magnitude of the problem. Our position has been and continues to be unequivocal. The Nicaraguan people have the right to live in democracy and to exercise their fundamental rights and to ensure their future through free, democratic, transparent, and plural elections. For these reasons, Costa Rica has backed this resolution and issues an appeal for us to continue accompanying the process. The defense of democracy and human rights is a collective responsibility and an essential mandate of this organization. And it's systematic, in the face of its systematic breakdown, we cannot remain silent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, delegation of Costa Rica. Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Colombia is grateful to the delegation of the United States and the states that have co-sponsored the resolution that we just adopted. Colombia has followed the process undertaken by the National Assembly of Nicaragua with great concern. This has to do with a partial amendment of the Constitution, and it is supposed to go to the legislature early September 2026 with a second vote projected for January of 2027. According to information available, that reform would consider, among other elements, expanding the presidential term from 6 to 7 years, as well as provisions aimed at excluding from electoral participation citizens and organizations from the opposition characterized by the officials as contrary to the established order. Some of these, well, the regime itself has stripped them of Nicaraguan nationality because of being in the opposition. This reform would be in addition to the one from 2025, which already substantially modified the constitutional architecture of the country, and it would also be one more step towards shutdown of the democratic space and elimination of all genuine political competition in Nicaragua. For Colombia, it is particularly worrisome that a process of such institutional importance could go forward without guarantees of genuine participation, without conditions of political pluralism, and without respecting the minimum standards. That is why we think it is up to this council to act with the seriousness that the situation merits. Accordingly, Colombia backs the call of or convocation of a meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs provided for in the OAS Charter, so that the foreign ministers of the hemisphere can collectively examine the situation in Nicaragua and adopt measures which are by law appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Colombia. Delegation of Belize, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My delegation wishes to begin by expressing its appreciation to the delegation of the United States and the co-sponsoring delegations for their work in developing this draft resolution. Belize notes with great concern that representative democracy, a core feature of the democratic nations of this hemisphere, has been unilaterally dispensed with in Nicaragua. The effect of that abrogation of democracy is that the people of Nicaragua no longer have the right to exercise a vote for their representative in government. Further, the people of Nicaragua no longer have a voice in the way their country is governed. Belize, in fulfillment of its constitutional and international treaty obligations, firmly upholds and promotes the inviolable right to vote in democratic processes. Belize views these principles as essential for peace, stability, and the prosperity of the people in this hemisphere. In this regard, the risk of eliminating such fundamental rights has immediate repercussions for the people of Nicaragua, and this organization has a responsibility to assess the situation and to speak out forcefully in defense of democracy and the rights of all people in our societies. Mr. Chair, for these reasons, Belize supported the resolution before us, and the call for the situation in Nicaragua to be submitted for discussion in a meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs of the member states of this organization. My delegation believes that the gravity of the situation requires this forum to be convened, and Belize commits its full participation. Mr. Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Belize. The floor is now to Ecuador. You have the floor.
The transparency and clarification of processes of electing rapporteurs is a right. Both the use of legitimate and legal resources for calling a consultation, well, this is an obligation when one is living in a democracy. A meeting of ministers of foreign affairs is not a meeting that goes against building bridges and bringing about peace. Quite to the contrary, it is the institutional mechanism, the legal and legitimate mechanism provided for that end. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, we say that Ecuador has been a co-sponsor of the initiative of adopting this resolution because of its democratic convictions to be consistent with our constitutional principles and major values, and the collective duty to defend these values established in this organization. The situation of Nicaragua crossed the threshold of being critical. The public statement of 19 July 2026, where it was stated that the elections will never again be held, as well as the announcement of constitutional amendments geared to permanently exclude any person perceived of as opposition, sound an alarm. They represent a deliberate attempt to abolish the principle of alternation in policy, in power, do away with political pluralism, and consolidate a regime that denies the Nicaraguan people the sovereign ability to freely elect those who will govern them. The resolution has been adopted. Let us move forward. We hope that the Nicaraguan people can have a permanent council, have an organization that is at the service of the loftiest ideals. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Ecuador. Grenada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair, Grenada has followed the consideration of this matter very, very carefully. and we appreciate the efforts undertaken by the initiating delegation of the United States, the sponsors, and other delegations to refine the text as we received it today. Our approach has been guided by several considerations. First, Grenada reaffirms and remains firmly committed to representative democracy, human rights, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and the purposes and principles of the Charter of the OAS. At the same time, we attach equal importance to respect for sovereignty, non-intervention, international law, and the integrity of the deliberative process established by our organization. It is precisely for that reason that Grenada considers the proposed meeting of consultation to be an appropriate forum in which ministers of foreign affairs may examine the situation, consider the available information and perspectives, and determine collectively what conclusions and actions may be warranted. In our view, and we agree, the convocation of such a meeting should not prejudge its deliberations or its outcome, and we are happy that this has been the declared position in introducing the resolution. Rather, it should enable ministers to exercise the responsibility entrusted to them under the Charter with the benefit of fuller consideration and with political judgment. Grenada therefore supported and supports the convocation of the meeting of consultation on the understanding that the deliberations and any subsequent action may remain firmly grounded in the OAS Charter, in the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and applicable international laws. Our vote today is accordingly a vote in favor of consultation, in favor of dialogue, a considered ministerial deliberation. It should not be interpreted as prejudging any subsequent proposal or measure that may come before the member states. Grenada will consider any such initiative on its own merits in accordance with the principles that I have outlined. We stand with the people of Nicaragua for representative democracy. We stand with this organization for the correct and proper pursuance of these rights on behalf of peoples in our hemisphere. I thank you, and I thank the Council for your attention.
Thank you, Delegation of Grenada. Delegation of Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. The draft presented by the United States, which was also co-sponsored by Argentina, was widely supported in the voting process. This is a clear demonstration that the OAS does not want to give up on its commitment to defend democracy. It is very important for the Nicaraguan people who are here representing all Nicaraguan people understand that the majority of member states are not willing to let any more time go by or use mechanisms that have not worked in the past. The only point laid out in the draft resolution is to give our chief diplomats the opportunity to sit around a table and determine the best paths, alternatives, and solutions going forward. If an authority in Nicaragua decides to cancel elections and democracy forever in that country, this can only be considered as a domestic political crisis. A regime that systematically violates human rights and takes away nationality from citizens and prevents civil society and religious organizations from meeting is a domestic political crisis. This is not just a potential threat internally. Is it not a threat to the entire region? How do we face such a crisis? How can we allow the status quo to continue? The OAS supports democratic principles. Our foreign ministers will have the opportunity to find effective and efficient solutions. This is a meeting of foreign ministers. This idea of killing the patient. A meeting of foreign ministers, is there nothing more? Is something peaceful? Does it go against any rules of procedure of the OAS? All of our countries are concerned about transnational criminal organizations. And so I wonder, an authoritarian regime that cancels democracy, doesn't that become a platform for these very criminal organizations to operate? I'll conclude here, Chair. And Rosalia Miller's here in the room behind me. And today, I think that she and others have regained hope in the OAS. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Argentina. Delegation of Honduras, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Permanent Council, we have had extensive discussions amongst member states on the situation in Nicaragua. The General Assembly has also expressed its position on various occasions through reports and conclusions from international and inter-American mechanisms. In all instances, the findings point to the same concern: the ongoing shutdown of civic space and democracy, as well as the freedom of expression and political plurality, as well as the foundations of the rule of law. All of these are necessary conditions for exercising the rights of individuals, yet these rights are constrained. And this reality means that the necessary conditions are not in place for free, competitive, and credible elections to be held in the future. Now, this meeting has been convened to address these concerns and for us to add our voice to the concerns of the international community. As an organization, we must shoulder the responsibility of taking decisive action to address the situation and explore mechanisms that will enable Nicaragua to come back to the path of democracy and respect for human rights and democratic institutions. As a country, as an organization, we cannot allow there to be any statements or actions that go against our common principles. We cannot be mere bystanders and not react or respond to this undermining of democratic values that lead to prosperity, stability, and well-being of our hemisphere. Chair, the draft resolution that was presented to this Permanent Council by the United States is clear and leaves no room for doubt as to the responsibility that our organization must take on. For this reason, Honduras is a co-sponsor of this draft resolution and believes that the meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs will be able to consider and determine the most appropriate courses of action. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Honduras. Delegation of Canada, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Canada would firstly like to underscore the importance of ongoing efforts to strengthen a collective response to the situation in Nicaragua. Restrictions of fundamental freedoms, civic space, and political participation are an ongoing source of concern. Yet, it is crucial that we maintain our attention and our commitment to address this situation. It is in this spirit that Canada welcomes the approval of the draft resolution.
Chair, as co-lead of the OAS Voluntary Group on Nicaragua, Canada will continue to be a strong and principled voice in support of democratic governance and the respect of human rights. We will stand alongside those working to advance and protect these fundamental principles in Nicaragua. The recent developments have brought us together today, emphasize the importance of maintaining our collective attention on these issues and of ensuring that we remain engaged in support of the Nicaraguan people. Canada believes that the inter-American system has a moral duty to respond when democratic principles and fundamental freedoms are placed at risk. This is a duty that we share as member states and one that requires continued cooperation and sustained engagement. In that regard, Canada thanks the United States for its leadership in advancing this resolution and is proud to stand alongside the co-sponsors in support of this initiative. The broad engagement of member states throughout this process demonstrates the collective commitment of our hemisphere to addressing the situation in Nicaragua and provides a strong foundation for a productive meeting of consultation. Canada supports the convening of a meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs. At this critical juncture, such a meeting provides member states with an opportunity not only to assess developments in Nicaragua, but also to demonstrate our shared resolve in defending democracy, human rights, and the preeminence of the rule of law across our hemisphere. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Canada. Delegation of Jamaica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished permanent representatives, ladies and gentlemen, the delegation of Jamaica welcomes the adoption for the convening of a meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs to consider the situation in Nicaragua. Jamaica considers the holding of regular, free, and fair elections to be an essential expression of the sovereignty of the people. The Inter-American Democratic Charter, to which Jamaica subscribes, identifies free and fair elections, access to power through constitutional means, political pluralism, and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms as essential elements of democracy. The Jamaican delegation therefore welcomes the opportunity for the hemisphere to come together through the meeting of consultation to consider the situation carefully and constructively. We believe that dialogue, diplomacy, and engagement must remain at the center of our collective response. The objective should be to encourage a peaceful path that safeguards democratic institutions, protects fundamental freedoms, and allows the Nicaraguan people to exercise their right to participate meaningfully in the governance of their country. At the same time, Jamaica reiterates that its position is not directed against the people of Nicaragua, nor is it intended to interfere in the internal affairs of a sovereign state. Our support for the resolution reflects our commitment to the shared principles and obligations of the Inter-American community. The Inter-American Democratic Charter itself establishes the promotion and consolidation of representative democracy while expressly recognizing the principles of non-intervention. Jamaica has consistently advocated for strengthening of democratic governance through the Americas and has supported efforts within the OAS to address threats to democratic order through dialogue and diplomatic engagement. Our delegation's position is therefore democracy, respect for the rule of law, and the right of people to freely determine their governments are principles that must be upheld. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Jamaica. Delegation of Peru, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few weeks ago, this council met to examine the situation in Nicaragua. And we did so at the beginning of this year and on previous occasions. And on all of these occasions, like Peru, like other member states, have expressed concern over the breakdown of democratic institutions in Nicaragua. And it is important for the OAS to continue to use all mechanisms provided for in its legal instruments to address this issue in Nicaragua. This reality cannot be addressed through expressions of concern. Recent events show that the situation is extremely concerning. There's an erosion of representative democracy. This is why Peru was one of the co-sponsors of the resolution presented by the U.S., and we feel that the outcome of the vote that we held today is a historic moment that will allow us to address what is going on in Nicaragua. It provides us with an opportunity to take a decisive step. The undermining of democracy must not continue. We heard recently the authorities of Nicaragua state that there will no longer be any elections. And in the National Assembly of Nicaragua, discussions will begin to further amend the Constitution. The meeting of foreign ministers will be a meeting of the highest authorities. The time has come for our organization and our authorities to speak out more clearly as to what is happening in Nicaragua and to use all instruments that we have available to take action to defend democracy in Nicaragua and in the region and hemisphere as a whole. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Peru. Delegation of Paraguay, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wish to note that Paraguay co-sponsored this resolution because we believe that the situation in Nicaragua needs to be addressed at the highest political level of our organization, and we are pleased that this resolution was just approved by our Council. The defense of democracy, human rights, and fundamental freedoms is one of the essential pillars of the OAS and a responsibility that all member states have taken on. To address the situation in Nicaragua, particularly the suffering of the people, we feel that it is necessary for our foreign ministers to address this issue at a high-level meeting so that our organization can help find paths forward to help restore democratic institutions and full respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. For Paraguay, elevating this discussion to the level of ministers of foreign affairs also reflects the importance that our organization should give to a situation that directly affects the principles and values that underpin the inter-American system. We hope that this meeting will be an opportunity for serious, constructive dialogue, and especially for the OAS to be able to contribute to realizing the aspirations of the Nicaraguan people to live in democracy with full respect for their fundamental rights. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Paraguay. I wish to thank at this stage all delegations for their remarks. And in accordance with the decision just adopted, the Chair, with the support of the General Secretariat, will prepare and submit for the consideration of Member States the draft agenda and draft rules of procedure for the meeting of consultation in accordance with Article 63 of the Charter of the Organization of American States. The necessary consultations will also be undertaken regarding the date of the meeting of consultation, as well as the appropriate timing for the submission of these documents to Member States for their consideration. As the next item on the order paper, in accordance with the request submitted by the delegation of Canada, we will proceed with the consideration of the draft declaration entitled establishment of the Inter-American Day Against Arbitrary Detention and for the release of persons detained for the exercise or defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The draft declaration has been presented by the delegations of Canada, Brazil, and Guatemala, with the co-sponsorship of the delegation of Antigua and Barbuda, Mexico, Uruguay, contained in documents CP/Doc 6240/26, revision 1. For this purpose, I am pleased to offer the floor to the delegation of Canada to present the draft declaration. Delegation of Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Excellencies, Chair. Chair, on behalf of my delegation and the delegations of Antigua and Barbuda, Brazil, Guatemala, Mexico, and Uruguay, I have the pleasure of submitting for the consideration of member states the draft text establishing an Inter-American Day against arbitrary detention and for the release of persons detained for the exercise of defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The initiative seeks to give greater visibility to an issue that has marked the history of our hemisphere and that has long been addressed within the legal and institutional framework of the Inter-American system. At its core, the text recalls a principle on which there is broad consensus, namely that no one should be arbitrarily deprived of their liberty, and underscores the importance of securing the release of persons detained for the exercise or defense of human rights. Mr. Chair, the text is intended to serve three related purposes: to honor those who have experienced arbitrary detention, to recognize the importance of memory, and to reaffirm the protection against arbitrary deprivation of liberty that are already firmly established in inter-American instruments. The proposed date of November 22nd, marking the adoption of the American Convention on Human Rights in 1969, was chosen to provide the observance with a common and distinctly inter-American point of reference. The text is deliberately framed in general terms. It does not refer to any particular situation, past or present, does not create new legal obligations or mechanisms, and does not seek to introduce new standards. Rather, it brings together principles and commitments that member states have developed collectively over many years. We believe there is value in giving these principles a clear and visible expression within the organization, both as a matter of remembrance and as an affirmation of the importance the hemisphere attaches to human rights. This symbolic gesture, Mr. Chair, especially today, amidst our discussions on deprivation of liberty and persecution of those raising their voices, would have an immense impact. Mr. Chair, this is a modest initiative. It creates no new legal obligations or institutional mechanisms, carries no financial implications, and participation in any commemoration would be voluntary. At its core, it is human dignity that we are seeking to affirm and protect. In that sense, the initiative is also inherently cross-cutting. Arbitrary detention can affect any person, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or belief, gender identity and expression, political opinion, social origin, or any other status. The text is therefore not directed at any particular group or national context. It speaks to a universal protection that should apply equally to all persons. Canada hopes that the declaration before us can command the broadest possible support. We would, of course, hope, let me be clear, we would hope, in the conditional tense, that it can ultimately be adopted by acclamation, especially in the context of our discussions today. However, we remain attentive to the views of all delegations. In closing, Chair, as I'm addressing this Council today for the last time, I would like to take this opportunity to express my immense gratitude to all OAS delegations and staff. I am deeply grateful for the friendship, the trust, the exchanges, and the many lessons I will take with me. It has been truly an honor to represent Canada around this table. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Canada. I would like to ask the permanent delegation of Uruguay. You have the floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Chair. Uruguay expresses its thanks to the delegation of Canada for its leadership in negotiating this draft declaration to establish the Inter-American Day Against Arbitrary Detention for the release of persons detained for the exercise or defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms. We would also like to use this opportunity to recognize our colleague and all of her work over the years at the OAS and her commitment to and defense of human rights defenders and defenders of democracy as well. We would like to note that this is a topic that has been discussed in different bodies by various delegations. We feel that the draft declaration is a reflection of many of our discussions on a sensitive issue for the region due to serious violations of human rights. And it is a way to condemn ongoing repression anywhere. This is a balanced proposal that was very carefully thought out and has legal grounds and a legal basis. It allows us to look at current challenges with respect to this issue and also provide a historic perspective. It allows us to recall that the Americas have experienced breakdowns in democracy during which thousands of people have been arbitrarily deprived of their freedom due to their political ideas. They've been unable to exercise their rights or defend the human rights of others and have been repressed by authoritarian regimes. This is the case for my country, Uruguay, during the civil-military dictatorship in the 70s and 80s. There was repression. The regime threw many people in jail for long periods of time. It is estimated that the number of people who were victims of arbitrary detention during that time frame is over 8,000. In 1976, Uruguay had the highest number of political prisoners per inhabitant in South America. Therefore, we feel that it is very important for this declaration to stress the importance of memory and justice as ways of strengthening democracy. It also recognizes the right to know the truth about serious violations that occurred in the past, as well as having guarantees of non-repetition and reparations. This also helps to strengthen the rule of law and prevent these events from happening again, and reinforces the principle of never again. We also appreciate that this is an inclusive declaration and addresses vulnerabilities faced by specific groups, especially women, pregnant women, lactating mothers, children, and adolescents, among others. Any state response needs to be in line with international commitments. Thousands of people have suffered from arbitrary detention and other forms of repression. I would like to recall here one of the people, the most well-known individuals imprisoned during the Uruguayan dictatorship, among many others, including José Pepe Morigo, who was also detained for several years. We want to keep the memory of victims alive, those who suffered from arbitrary detention, and promote awareness in the region about the importance of protecting human dignity and the exercise of fundamental freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you, delegation of Uruguay. Chair recognizes the delegation of Argentina.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to thank and congratulate Canada for its leadership over the years in addressing this very important issue for democratic processes and the history of democracy in our countries. I wish to refer specifically to the process behind this document, and I say this because on various occasions, well, we know that this draft resolution has been worked on for over a year, and when this draft began to be discussed, it was discussed by 8 countries who actively participated in those conversations. Then there was a long period of time, and ultimately, in July, if I remember correctly, there was a text that was finally distributed to all countries. That was the first version. And I think it was last Thursday, our delegation presented a few suggestions to improve upon the text. And those comments, for reasons that I don't understand, were not distributed by the delegation that led this process. Nevertheless, on Friday, the draft was presented without including comments, at least not our comments, which we had submitted the previous Thursday. And I bring this up because this leads me to the consultation, or the question I'd like to ask of Canada through you, Chair, in a very constructive way. If the delegation of Canada feels that there's an opportunity to have a conversation and set a date, perhaps at the next council meeting, to achieve broad consensus and support for this initiative. So, in other words, I'm not saying that I oppose this initiative in any way. I'm just asking if there's an opportunity, because there really wasn't sufficient time to have comments of some members be incorporated. So could we perhaps set a concrete date so that we can address this at the next council meeting? Again, Chair, I ask this in a very constructive manner, and I look forward to hearing the response from our colleague from Canada, who can perhaps tell us what we can decide and do going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Argentina. Delegation of Paraguay, you have the floor.
Sorry. Okay. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Paraguay is grateful for the inclusion of this item on the order of business, and we'd like to reiterate our firm commitment of opposition to all forms of arbitrary detention in the region. This is clearly relevant for protecting human rights and fundamental freedoms in this hemisphere. Accordingly, we wish to recognize and express thanks for the leadership of the distinguished delegation of Canada having given impetus to this issue. Precisely because of the importance we attribute to this issue, we think it's important that we be able to take the time necessary to come up with a text that can enjoy the broadest possible consensus backing. Several delegations have said it would be advisable to have more time to continue studying the draft declaration, and indeed some comments have been made and positions have been put forward which we think should be considered and debated with greater care. They're not yet fully reflected in the text we have before us. Accordingly, we think the wisest course would be to continue the dialogue and give the delegation space to work on those pending aspects. We understand that we still have time to do so, and we believe it's worth making this effort precisely because of the importance and relevance of the issue that we are addressing. We are certain that through dialogue and the spirit of consensus, characteristic of the work of this organization, we'll be able to come up with a resolution that reflects or a declaration that reflects the concerns expressed, but also transmit a firm, clear voice, with a firm and clear voice, our opposition to arbitrary detention in the region. I reiterate, we think it's very important that a declaration be adopted to declare November 22nd as the day for marking this, but as I've said earlier, we believe that we need a bit more time to reflect on this and to debate it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Delegation of Paraguay, Delegation of the United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States remains steadfast in its support for political prisoners, their families, and all those throughout our hemisphere who peacefully advocate for democracy, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. We continue to call for the immediate unconditional release of all persons unjustly detained for political reasons, and for governments throughout the region to respect freedoms of expression, peaceful assembly and association, and citizens' rights to participate in political processes and have their voices heard. These principles are central to the Inter-American system and to the commitments that all of us have undertaken under the Inter-American Democratic Charter and the foundational instruments of this organization. The United States appreciates the efforts of Canada, Brazil, Guatemala, and the other delegations to draw greater attention to the situation of political prisoners in our hemisphere. We believe additional negotiations would provide delegations an opportunity to work towards language capable of receiving the broadest possible support. Our position to text should not be misunderstood as diminishing our commitment. The United States stands firmly with political prisoners and with all those working peacefully for democracy and freedom throughout the Americas. I would like to take a moment just to recognize an individual has dedicated her lives for this exact cause, Rosalia Miller. She's here today and has committed herself and her family to the freedom of Nicaraguans. And individuals like this, I do believe, are certainly worthy of special recognition. And I thank Rosalia for her efforts and her inspiration to all of us to stand firm and in support, making this one of the greatest organizations in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of the United States. Guatemala, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. The delegation of Guatemala is grateful for the presentation by the delegation of Canada and states its support for the draft declaration to establish the Inter-American Day Against Arbitrary Detention and for the release of persons detained for the exercise or defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms. This initiative is a valuable reminder of the commitment that the member states of the OAS have taken on to promote and protect human rights, strengthen democracy, and show full respect for the rule of law. This commitment takes on special importance in the current context, particularly in the face of vis-a-vis the situation in Nicaragua, which is a matter that continues to be a cause for concern in our hemisphere. Arbitrary detention for political reasons or as the result of the exercise of the defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms is an imminent phenomenon in the region that affects victims and their family members. Therefore, we consider it's fundamental to reaffirm the importance of truth, justice, full reparation, and guarantees of non-repetition as pillars for consolidating democratic, inclusive societies that are respectful of human dignity. We'd also like to highlight the value of preserving the historic memory of the victims and their family members, and we recognize which is recognized in this instrument. It's very relevant for my country because it totally ties in with our priorities when it comes to protecting human rights, strengthening democratic institutional framework, and preserving historical memory as a tool for preventing the repetition of human rights violations. While Guatemala has accompanied the efforts in the OAS to give visibility to the situation of persons deprived of liberty for political reasons in the Americas, we recognize that this phenomenon is part of making use of the justice system in our own country. This is a situation that we have put before this Council, and because of this, we observe with concern the situation of indigenous authorities such as Luis Pacheco and Hector Chaclan, who were deprived of liberty for 15 months and who face accusations of terrorism, illicit conspiracy, and obstruction of criminal process in relation to supporting democracy in the general elections of 2023. In addition, in Guatemala, there is criminalization against judicial officers and human rights defenders, which has been extensively documented by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and by the UN special procedures. This highlights the importance of us states maintaining a constructive dialogue with the international human rights mechanisms so as to continue strengthening the institutions so as to guarantee full respect for due process, judicial independence, and fundamental guarantees. In this regard, the proclamation of 22 November, the date on which the American Convention on Human Rights was adopted in 1966 as the Inter-American Day Against Arbitrary Detention and for the release of persons detained for the exercise or defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms, is a tribute to those who, at different times in the history of this hemisphere, have been arbitrarily deprived of their liberty. Chairman, this instrument is based on fundamental principles of the Inter-American system: freedom, human dignity, democracy, and the rule of law, sending a message of solidarity to victims and their family members. In addition, it emphasizes that no person should be subject to arbitrary deprivation of their liberty for exercising or defending human rights and fundamental freedoms. That is why my delegation states its support for the adoption of this declaration as a sign of our collective commitment to protection of human rights and the strengthening of democracy in the hemisphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Guatemala. The floor is now passed on to the Delegation of Ecuador.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Canada. We applaud the Canada's commitment to the defense of human rights, as well as the leadership that has been displayed by the representative who is bidding farewell today. We wish you the best of success. Chairman of the Permanent Council, Secretary General, distinguished permanent and alternate representatives, and members of the head table. We are at the core of the evolution of inter-American law. No one is questioning, because we have made these advances, no one is questioning that arbitrary detentions should be condemned. That's not what's up for debate. The debate is whether we need more time to come up with wording that would enjoy full consensus. Drafting is politically simple. The actual exercise of international responsibility lies in endowing the concepts with content, technical precision, and clear limits, legal boundaries. Leave nothing to ambiguous interpretations, because they would not give rise to commitments that could be a matter of demand. Ecuador reaffirms clearly its firm commitment to protect personal liberty, due process, and the prohibition on arbitrary detentions. These are principles that are enshrined in the American Convention on Human Rights, the American Declaration of the Rights and Duties of Man, and the consistent case law of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. And precisely because of the importance of the issue, and in order to seek that precision and that consensus, our delegation considers it necessary to have the additional time for discussion and negotiation. A text of this nature should be the result of a careful deliberative process that enables all of the delegations to carefully examine the scope of its provisions, the precision of its language, and its compatibility with the different legal systems and national realities of the member states. We believe that precisely when we want a guarantee of legitimacy, we need to hammer out consensus through a real dialogue. The only way that we can, this is the only way we can attain the future efficacy of the instrument. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Ecuador. Dominican Republic, you now have the floor.
Señor presidente, la delegación.
Chairman, the delegation of the Dominican Republic is grateful for the opportunity to take the floor in considering this important draft declaration, which proposes the establishment of the Inter-American Day Against Arbitrary Detention and for the release of persons detained for the exercise or defense of human rights and fundamental freedoms. For our country, arbitrary detention is a serious human rights violation, as well as a violation of the fundamental principles that undergird the rule of law, the deprivation of liberty of a person without proper legal guarantees, without due process, or as a result of the legitimate exercise of their rights and fundamental freedoms, is incompatible with the commitments taken on by our states in the inter-American sphere. As we have indicated before the Permanent Council in May of 2025, these practices have detrimental impact not only on those who are directly subjected to them, but also have consequences for our societies and for the peaceful coexistence of nations. The use of arbitrary deprivation of liberty as a mechanism for pressure, reprisal, or coercion is also a major challenge when it comes to respect for international law and consolidation of an international order that is rules-based and based as well on respect and cooperation. Mr. Chairman, the proposal that we're considering today is of special importance because it offers us an opportunity to strengthen the hemispheric conscience regarding this issue and to reaffirm our collective commitment to protect those who exercise and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms. Our delegation thinks that it is particularly valuable that the project helps, or the draft helps to give visibility to arbitrary detention, promote the ending of such practices, and reinforce the mechanisms for denunciation and protection set out in our inter-American human rights system. In addition, our efforts should continue to be geared to ensuring that all persons deprived of liberty can have the guarantees of due process, as well as the effective remedies provided for by domestic and international law. In this regard, our delegation expresses its support for the initiative, convinced that establishing an Inter-American Day would be an opportunity to recall that personal liberty, human dignity, and the exercise of fundamental rights should be protected with no exceptions. Mr. Chairman, considering that several delegations have asked for more time to consider the draft declaration, well, my delegation would not object to taking more time to consider this so as to come up with a text with which all of the delegations can identify, especially mindful that the issue is of vital importance for our region, as has been stated by those delegations who have spoken before me today. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish all the best to the delegate of Canada. She has been working for many years not only on these issues related to the defense of human rights and democracy, but also other issues that are of great interest to the inter-American system. So all the best for Mo going forward. The Dominican Republic, Chairman, reiterates its commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, the defense of international law, and strengthening the principles that undergird our inter-American system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, delegation of the Dominican Republic. Delegation of Argentina, you have the floor.
In my statement, I neglected to professionally greet Maud. I have the utmost respect for her, and I wanted to say that. I would feel uncomfortable doing so only in private and not publicly. And also, what I said when I indicated that I understand for some, well, no doubt there was no bad intent here. The proposals that we suggest were not circulated to the other members. And in general, as a good practice in negotiating processes, proposals that are being made by a given country should be circulated to all the others so as to enrich the process. But quite simply, our proposal was to understand clearly that, well, two things. To look at the possibility of doing this at the next Permanent Council so that it might be approved by acclamation, and also recognize the leadership of an initiative of Maud and of Canada beyond this being her last Permanent Council meeting. If it were not approved here, but at the next one, that would not diminish at all our recognition of the leadership of Canada and Maud in particular in this process. Thank you, Chair.
Tina, Delegation of Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to start by thanking all the delegations for their views expressed today and also for the warm words. We do recognize that we have not reached consensus on certain elements of the text that we have submitted for consideration. At the same time, our consultations suggest that there is broad support for the underlying concept and for the establishment of the day itself, the Inter-American Day itself. As facilitator, Canada has sought to reflect the views and concerns of a wide range of delegations, and the text that was submitted for today's consideration in our assessment reaches the furthest point we were able to reach in developing a balanced formulation that accommodates all those different perspectives. However, that said, of course, we are willing and ready to continue working on the text with all delegations that are amenable to this, and we remain at your disposal for further consultations and negotiations, but we do hope that this text can be adopted as soon as possible. And I would like just to close by saying that the adoption of the text today would have had probably an exponential symbolic gesture as we are discussing in Nicaragua and also the situation of Nicaraguan people. But again, we are open to further negotiations and we look forward to further consultations with all delegations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegation of Canada. The Chair takes note of the views expressed by the distinguished delegations and of the request for additional time to allow for further consultations. Considering the interventions and with a view to facilitating agreement among delegations, I would suggest that the sponsoring delegation undertake the necessary consultations with interested delegations and work towards presenting a revised version of the draft declaration reflecting the outcome of those consultations. The Chair would propose that the matter be brought back for the consideration of the General Council at the forthcoming meeting once the necessary consultations have taken place and a version that commands consensus is available. If there are no objections, this is so agreed. We will now move to item 5. As our next item, I would like to consult the Council on whether there is agreement for the approval of the minutes of meetings 2493 and 2494 held in April 2024, as well as meetings 2595 and 2596 held in June 2026, and meetings 2597 held in July 2026. So approved. I now offer the floor to delegations wishing to raise matters of a strictly informational nature. I wish to remind delegates that pursuant to Article 45C of the Rules of Declaration, interventions under this item shall be limited to matters of a strictly informational nature. The Chair will call to order any interventions that exceeds that scope. I also recall that matters of a substantive nature may be addressed through the appropriate procedures established in the Rules of Procedure, including the timely inclusion on the agenda of a regular meeting or the convening of a special meeting or consideration by the relevant committee of the Council. The floor is now open, and the Chair recognizes the delegation of Argentina.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a matter of information, on 17 August, just a few days ago, well, it marked one more anniversary of the death of General José de San Martín. He was a key leader in the independence of Argentina, Chile, and Peru. And together with Bolívar, well, they constituted a whole way of thinking associated with the importance of having a continent that can carry out the ideals of liberty, democracy, and today I came a bit late because at the monument for San Martín here in Washington, we had a ceremony to recall his role as father of our country, but also noting his contribution to the liberation of the neighboring countries and to pan-Latin American thinking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, delegation of Argentina. Delegation of the United States, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to briefly remind the delegations that this Friday there's an event taking place starting at the museum and then moving on to the Aztec patio called Passport to Patriotism. It's an exciting event that starts with the erection of the space astronaut on our lawn by renowned artist Brandon Murphy. It stands 23 feet tall. It has garnered already a tremendous attention both through the media as well as the entire DC crowd. So we do believe it'll be something exciting. Again, it's Friday at 3 o'clock, starting at the museum, and then moving on to the Aztec patio. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, delegation of the United States. The Chair recognizes the delegation of the Dominican Republic. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take this opportunity under other business to inform the Permanent Council that President Luis Abinader on Sunday, August 16th, by Decree 554-26, designated Mr. Victor Bissonoasa as new Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Dominican Republic after the resignation of Ambassador Roberto Alvarez. Minister Bissono is a public servant and a politician with more than 3 decades of institutional work, who now will head up Dominican Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Before being designated to this position, Minister Bissono served as Minister of Housing, Habitat, and Constructions and had previously been Minister of Industry, Commerce, and MSMEs from 2020 to 2025. He also had a key career as a legislator for more than 10 years. On 4 occasions, he served as legislator for the National District. In that same decree, President Luis Abinader designated as Ambassador Emeritus to the outgoing Minister of Foreign Affairs, Roberto Alvarez. Thank you very much.
Delegation of the Dominican Republic, delegation of Chile, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Two merely informative matters. First, I wish the best to our colleague from Canada, and we, as the delegation of Chile, wish you the best for after all these years of your work with our delegation. And at the same time, I would like to thank the director of the museum, who has taken or received 14 children here at the OAS, and actions such as that is to pass on to citizens what the OAS does. So we wanted to thank the director of the museum and that it be reflected in the record. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, delegation of Chile. Delegation of Uruguay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank you for your mention at the outset of this session regarding the 201st anniversary of the independence of our country, the Oriental Republic of Uruguay, which will be celebrated on August 25th. For us, it is a matter of pride that the 201st anniversary of independence comes at a time when we've had 41 years of uninterrupted democracy. Most of these 200+ years, fortunately, have been in democracy with some brief interruptions, but also working in all multilateral forums. Our historical leader, José Artigas, always promoted the federation and unity of the peoples of the region, obviously always respecting the particular sovereignty of each people. So we're grateful that here as well, this has been recalled, given that as of our next Permanent Council meeting, the date will be in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegation of Uruguay. Before concluding this meeting, I would like to inform delegations that at the request of the Secretary General, a special meeting of the Permanent Council will be convened on August 26 to consider the report of the special mission to Bolivia and the report of his official visit to Haiti. Formal convocation and additional information regarding the meeting will be provided to delegates in due course. There being no further requests for the floor, I thank all delegations for your participation. The meeting is now adjourned.